Thank you everyone for joining. Today we are going to be talking about theme-based super apps, and I have some fantastic guests over here with me to talk about this. But before I start, I just want to give sort of a 2-minute introduction. So if you've read a blog post, which I published recently, you'll see that I believe we are not going to have a WeChat over here in North America. So when you look at WeChat, you see something that encompasses chat, bill payments, and sort of anything and everything. It's sort of like an operating system for all of China. Now, I believe that in North America, we're not going to have something like that. But what we are going to have is what we call theme-based super apps. So they're essentially an app that starts with a core product and builds around that. And it's all built around a specific theme. And that's where I believe we're going to go. So just a quick visualization over here. We obviously have someone from Uber joining us, but you'll see they built an app around mobility and a whole bunch of things around, getting anything, going anywhere. And we'll talk about that soon. At super.com, we're building a super app around savings and trying to help people save across the board. And a little bit of a different example, you'll see Google Maps has built a super app around location. So in each one of these cases, that core theme lets the customer know why they're opening the app, the reason they're opening the app, and everything is built around that as the core theme. And that's the type of super apps we are already seeing in North America, and we believe it's going to continue to grow. So what I'd like to do is introduce our 3 panelists who have come here to join. I will start with Loren. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everyone, thanks for joining. Loren Kosloske, I've been at Uber for a little over 3 years, predominantly sit out of our Seattle office, but I focus on kind of our new verticals and new products, predominantly within the travel and airport space. So when you think about using Uber outside of your home community, that's predominantly the space that I'm thinking in. And I sit on our mobility side of the business. So typically the app that has the black icon, not the one that has the green for Uber Eats, but there is some interplay as we'll talk through later today.
Awesome. Thank you, Loren. And then we have Sid from Coinbase.
Hey folks, I'm Sid. I'm a product manager at Coinbase. I've been at Coinbase, I want to say almost 6 years now. So I've been here a little while, watching the company scale and helping grow it. I've been working primarily on the Coinbase wallet product. I lead Wallet, which is our self-custody crypto product that lets you store your own crypto anywhere in the world. It's open to all customers everywhere, and then use your crypto. So we're very focused on helping customers discover things to do with their crypto, including through things called decentralized apps. And over the course of my career at Coinbase, I've also worked on products like Coinbase Commerce, on Web3, and more broadly across DeFi and NFTs, etc. And in previous lives, I've been an investment banker on Wall Street. I've worked in the Indian government, and I helped launch one of India's first robo-advisors. So I've had a few different experiences in tech and financial services.
Awesome. Thank you, Sid. And then we have Sanjin, who was previously at Meta and worked on Instagram, but I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, happy to. Hi, everybody. I was back in the day, I was at Instagram when Instagram was much earlier. We had $0 in revenue back in the day. I mean, you can imagine how early that was. And I worked on many things that Instagram did become, for example, Instagram shopping, Instagram creator tools. And through that journey, we tried to also build our version of a super app, which is if you come to do something in Instagram, how can you do other things while in Instagram as well? So we'll share some tidbits around that. And after that, I was the head of product and general manager at Airbnb. And I spent the last 3 years at Coinbase as well, as a VP for the retail product as well. Excited to be here today.
Awesome. All right. Well, Loren, Sid, Sanjin, we have great people here in only 45 minutes. So we're going to jump right into it. Let's start with Loren. So, the theme of mobility, going anywhere, getting anything. Can you tell us how this has evolved over time? Where did Uber start? Where did Uber Eats start? What are you adding, and how is this all coming together?
Yeah, I think first, it's important to know, Uber started back in 2009. So it's been a long journey. And it's not something that you do right away. But if you think about it, we started as Uber Cab in March of 2009. A few months later, we rebranded to Uber. But then fast forward 5 years later, and we launched Uber Eats. Then fast forward another 5 years. And in 2019, back in May, we brought Uber Eats to like the airports and venues experience. So today you can utilize Uber Eats post TSA or airport security at Tampa Bay Airport, as well as Toronto, but you can also do Uber Eats at Yankee Stadium directly in your seat. So we're continuing to go deeper there. And we've gone even further with July of 2020. We brought groceries to the Uber Eats platform and have continued to bring that out. So not only can you get food, but now you can also get your groceries that you need every day. Now, then COVID hit, we continued to innovate throughout that time. So actually in August of 2020, on the mobility side of the business, we launched boats in the United Kingdom, brought rental cars in April of 2021, package delivery during like Q4 of 2021 as well. And they also spun up Uber Park back in December of 21. That one is something that we're no longer doing, but it was a great like thing. The big thing to know is like test and iterate and be afraid to fail as well. Was like a big learning thing that we did throughout COVID. And then in May of 2022, we brought the ability to book chartered, so like limos, like longer limos, chartered vehicles for like bachelor and bachelorette parties, various activities there and for weddings. And then in August of 2022, we brought long distance and short distance training Coach. So Coach is bus in the UK. Launched flights a few weeks ago, and then also announced our launch of boats in Greece. And then just recently also announced our launch of car share, which is currently live in Australia, and more to come here throughout the next several months. So overall, like we've done a lot. If you look at that journey, you'll note that it took a couple of years for us to really accelerate everything that we've been doing. First, we started with a very solid core product and wanted to continue to expand and make sure like at the end of the day, when you want to go anywhere or get anything, that like you can utilize Uber to do that consistently across all those product experiences. I think going forward, I would think that about, wherever and whenever you are typically utilizing Uber to get things or to go to and from, all of those services are technically fair game for us to think about as like future opportunities. I can't tell you specifically which one's coming next. It's really a prioritization question. But I think like if you were to put yourself in my seat and think through like how you would prioritize, it's probably the same approach that we're thinking about it. I will say too, while this topic is super focused on super apps, the super app is actually a topic we don't talk about internally at Uber. It's not something that we're focused on what are we missing? We're really focused on like using data to drive what products make the most sense and how we can continue to deliver like the magic of Uber within those spaces as well.
Amazing. Thank you, Loren. And there's a lot of people who don't really talk about it as a super app. So even if you talk to Google and the Google Maps team, they don't necessarily call it a super app, but it is a way, at least as an industry term, for us to understand how you're building things around a core theme. I do want to switch to Sid and action, but just one more question, Loren. You mentioned, I believe you said Park is something that you decided not to continue with. How does the company decide when a test is working and they want to double down on it versus when a test is something that they want to show?
Yeah, I think we kind of look at it regardless if it's successful or not across some similar fields. One is, do we have the right to play in that consumer mindset? So what does engagement look like? That doesn't mean just like, are you transacting and like actually spending money on it? But like, are you clicking into the experience, coming back again and again? And what do those interactions look like? Not only for that core product, but also at a platform level. The next one that we want to look at is like the operational model. We want to make sure that it's validated both from the user perspective and the business. So that can mean, do we have the right partner? Are we setting it up for like the right back-end capabilities to scale? What are we learning throughout that to continue to think about like what it takes to go from maybe a small city to a global experience? Then the last big ones are really around, product market fit. Can Uber do that? So in case of Park, like it's a big mental leap to think about, I'm going to take an Uber to go to or from dinner to now be like, oh, where am I going to park my car there? And like trying to change that. So that was really what we were looking at doing. We learned a lot out of it. But it was super fun. It was a very different space for us to think through.
Amazing. Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
We're going to jump into like bridges and how to get a customer to think about one product and then the next product. But I do want to flip it over to Sanchin. So Sanchin, you were at Instagram early. You were part of the team that was talking about bringing payments and commerce into Instagram. Tell us about that journey.
Yeah, happy to. I think let's rewind back to 2012, 2013, and 14. Instagram is a one-trick pony. All you can do is add filters to your beautiful photos. And I think to Loren's earlier point, you got to build an incredibly successful first use case before you even earn the right to talk about super apps, in my opinion. You know, you got to have something that is so amazing, people fell in love with it and they're using it tremendously. And then you can think about, okay, what adjacencies, what other things I would like the customer to do in my app. But that first right is really, really important. So that was our right. And then we started thinking, okay, people are spending time, what other activities they're doing? One example of this was we noticed that customers and businesses were using Instagram for ways that we never thought we designed it for. What was it? If you ever travel to Thailand or any of these Southeast Asian countries, businesses never had websites. So they will create an Instagram profile and put a photo saying this flip-flop, this t-shirt is available for $15, you know, and people will be like, wow, I love that. And they'll say, okay, message me your PayPal and your address and I'll ship it to you. Now, I always say, the customer leads the way. What I mean by that is, sometimes your customers are showing you things that they want to do with your app. And the real genius of product is then figure out, is that the right thing to invest in or not? So we decided that it was worth investing in because we saw engagement coming up earlier. And to Loren's earlier point, we felt, do we have the right to play over there? Meaning Instagram was already the visual catalog of the world. You could actually open it up and you can see all the visual stuff at Instagram. So we did feel that when it comes to visual commerce, not when you buy a toilet paper where there is no visual commerce associated with it, you probably are buying it just purely on price. But when there is design aesthetics, feel, look, etc. involved, that's visual commerce, and that's where we had the right to win. So we started adding that, and Instagram shopping became a huge success. And then we said, okay, by the way, this is just an example of a use case that made us into a super app. But again, we never talked about a super app. All we talked about was what other problems that customers have that we can uniquely solve. And then we start thinking, okay, what else can we do? And this is where I want to talk about a failure use case as well, right? Because I think oftentimes we will not find all use cases working in the app. And here's an example. We had this assumption or hypothesis that, you are sitting down at a restaurant in New York City. What do you typically do? You pull out your phone, you take the photo of that beautiful food that you're eating, and you post it on Instagram. In fact, you would tell your friends, no, don't touch it. Let me first take a bloody photo before we even eat, right? And that's what people would do. So the natural conclusion from that point onwards, you could potentially draw as a hypothesis is that, well, the person is already there. They're already eating. They're already taking a photo. They should be able to pay right there using their Instagram credentials. Right? And we had hundreds of millions of users around the world whose credit card information we as Facebook had, right? So we tried that, and that didn't take off. Right? Because the leap from going from what they were doing, putting the phone down and then actually eating and then remembering to open Instagram to pay again was not the right leap. Right? And customers that use case never took off. So I think it's important to recognize in these cases that while it's important to do everything under one roof for the customer around a theme, but within that theme as well, there might be adjacencies where you will have success faster, quicker, deeper than adjacency where you will take forever to get to. I'm not saying Instagram cannot solve the payment use case. Probably they can, but at that point in time, that wasn't the right adjacency to pursue.
Awesome. Thank you, Sanchin. And Sid, so, I know Coinbase does talk about a super app. Brian Armstrong was just in the news last week mentioning a super app. So maybe for the newbies out here, a lot of people think of crypto as I'm just going to come in, I'm going to buy and sell crypto. So you could expand on what other use cases are, what other consumer value there is, and how Coinbase is thinking about that.
Yeah, for sure. So if you look beyond the trading of crypto, totally get that. Everyone's first experience with crypto is usually just buying their first Bitcoin or buying Ethereum. But if you look beyond that, like our vision, and this is not just at Coinbase, this is actually this is a huge ecosystem of builders in crypto. And what we're all trying to do is create real utility and use cases for crypto. So once you own your crypto, can you then go and use it for X, Y, and Z different use cases? And so one big example is just financial services, right? What crypto offers is, for the first time, anyone in the world can onboard and own the same currency as anyone else in the world. And they can send it seamlessly. So you can save your money, you can earn interest on it, you can send that money around. So in that sense, it's offering something that could never have been done before. And that's really where I think the core use case, the first like super app use case comes in, which is kind of being part of this global network of people that are all owning and storing this currency. They're able to send it amongst themselves, etc. And then on top of that, you have a bunch of applications. And so this, I think the second kind of journey that crypto is going through is the application phase. And so, with blockchains like Ethereum, you can actually build, like developers can build any program that does anything with crypto. And so it's like this infinite space of like anyone can build an application, and anyone who owns crypto can use that application anywhere in the world. And so I think our conception of a super app potentially would be that everyone starts off by buying some crypto, and then we provide a range of all these different use cases that you can use with your crypto inside the app. And this includes financial services. This includes things like buying NFTs, buying audio NFTs, storing your crypto identity. So you have a decentralized identity that you can use in any of these different crypto applications. All of that really comes together inside one app. And that's like, I think how we haven't officially said we're building a super app, I don't think, except in a few interviews, but generally speaking, that's how I would see things playing out.
Got it. And that actually goes back to what Sachin said about first having that core use case that gives you the right to build on top of that, right? So obviously, Uber with rides, Instagram with photos, and Sid, Coinbase with the buying and selling of the crypto. And then once you have that core base, you can build off of that. In our case, we started the business around hotel deals. And we have tens of thousands of customers coming in, buying hotels at great rates. And now there's ability to say, hey, you just saved a bunch of money on your hotel. What else can we help you save money on, and what can we build around there? So we're constantly testing other use cases. I want to talk about some of the core principles on building a super app. So I'll just share my screen for a second over here, and I'll talk through these 6. So the first one is building a bridge between services. And that's, when a customer is using one service, how can you bridge them to get to the next service? 2 is friction-free activation. So even when you do bridge them, how do you activate them? How can you make it as easy as possible for them to use and try the new service? 3 is use case frequency. So if you're going to build a super app, you want to have an app that people are opening up all the time, not something that people open up just once a month. There's a brand promise. So every time you're trying a service, it should live up to that brand promise and have a consistent experience. Number 5, which is one that a lot of people don't talk about, is expectations on usage. We simply cannot expect every customer to use every service. And if you believe that they're going to use every service, then you're living in another land. And then finally, number 6 is AI. So we've all seen the impact that AI has had in a short period of time, and we know what it's going to let us do in the future. And one of the criticisms of super apps is that there's just too much going on, too many services, too many offerings. And I believe that we can use AI to leverage that as an accelerator for super apps. Let's talk about bridge between services. So that's one of the hardest things, which is you come in for one service and you need to get the customer attuned to or used to using another service and having a bridge from one to the other, and not just being like, here's a grid of all the things you can do. So I'll kind of open it up to the panel if anyone has any examples they'd like to share.
So you're right, like bridges are super important. They're also like, it's pretty easy actually to throw a bunch of products in an app. You can think about the Uber app 2 years ago, even pre-COVID. We had these little buttons that would have various different types of products. You had ride, then you'd have, like we have a rent one now, we have a travel one technically, like there's various different ones, but really like for us, bridges requires personalization to be really consistent and help drive that. It's a hard thing to do. And it's one thing we really just started playing around with a lot. So if you think about what we're doing with like Uber travel, for those of you outside of the UK, if you like click on the travel icon in the Uber app, it'll ask you to like link your email, and we'll ingest like third-party travel bookings and help automatically nudge like reserve or rental cars depending on where you're going. And that's really where we're starting to play around with the bridge, is knowing when and where you're going. How can we make the best recommendation for you for products that are maybe outside of our core on-demand offering? However, though, when we're thinking about our bridges on our end, we're also super focused on making sure that value prop for that bridge works for, our drivers on the mobility side, our couriers on the Uber Eats side, or even the restaurants or grocery providers. So the bridge is one that's super top of mind for us. So I think the fact that it's listed #1 for you, it's our priority at #1 as well.
Awesome. For me, by the way, for Uber, I think one of the best things you've done is pretty simple. It's when you're ordering food from a restaurant, you're prompting to order something else from somewhere else. Like, also get something from the convenience store while your driver's already on the way, right? And the first time you do that, now you're like, oh, wait, maybe every time I need something from the convenience store, I should use Uber, right? But for most people, they wouldn't think about that. They're just like, oh, I'm just going to use Uber Eats to get my restaurant food, not necessarily my groceries or my convenience store items or flowers or anything else. Sid or Sanchin, do you have something to add here?
I think, I'd reflect like we've probably taken a slightly different approach on Wallet to like what bridges to build and where and when. And the way we do that is we actually work a little bit backwards. And what we did first was we opened up a platform where users can discover anything that's going on in the crypto app ecosystem. So there's a bunch of crypto app developers, they're building stuff anyway and putting it on the blockchain. We let our users access all of them, right? Then we see what's succeeding, like what are the sparks, where are people like organically going, and we're not necessarily directing them there. They're finding about this stuff on Reddit, on Twitter, through friends, etc. And this app platform is totally open, so we don't pick who's succeeding, who's winning. And then when we see something is working really well, we don't try to compete with it. Instead, we build a more native interface for that application that still uses the underlying business, but just provides like a more seamless, like there's a dedicated button to it in the app. There's a much better flow that's better than using a website, because these apps all start as websites, and then we graduate them to like very clean native like built-in experiences. And so the examples I can give you are DEX trading, right? Like one of the first big successes is in crypto has been these decentralized exchanges like Uniswap, for example. We found a bunch of people 3 years ago of our users were going to use these dApps and connecting their wallet. We brought that into Coinbase Wallet in a native experience. It still uses Uniswap and all these other DEXs, but users have an easier bridge to access it. We did the same thing with staking, right? Users are going and doing this anyway. We've done the same thing with NFTs. People are going to all these marketplaces. We bring that into the app. So I think maybe it's something that's a little bit unique about crypto is that it's permissionless, and so people are building all these products anyway. And so we can then, as a super app, we can pick and choose what to bring in a very like first party way when the time is right. And this we get good like signal before we make any firm commitments to build something.
Yeah, I think these are great examples between what Loren and Sid are saying, Hussein, because if you think about it, there's a tale of two different stories. Uber, first party experiences owned and operated by Uber, everything is at Uber. Coinbase, not like that. Coinbase super app strategy is more like the Apple strategy, where these apps are already there. How can I make it easy for you to access? And when it becomes successful and maybe there's a better way to do it, they build it natively. So I think it's important to recognize there are two different tales to how to build your super apps, not just one way forward.
That's exactly what I was thinking as you were speaking, and we fall more under the Loren Uber scenario where we're managing the experience. If a third party wants to come in and offer a savings use case, we want to help your customer save on gas, we want to help your customer save on groceries. We'll work with them, we'll tailor the experience, we'll work on the API integration, and we'll try and make something work. Whereas Sid, you have this great benefit that you can just have this open app store and like you figure out what people want. Loren and I have a lot more work to do because we have to like assess each one and build each one, or at least a smoke test for each one before we can learn and see what customers actually do. So that's a great position to be in. Let's talk about the expectations on usage, which is one of the core principles. Again, I don't think we can expect every customer to use every service. So wanted to see what cross-sell rate you could hope for. Like when you have a customer using one product, what percentage of customers do you expect will use more than one product or more than two products? If you have some numbers you can share, that'd be fantastic.
I think I don't recall the exact numbers, but I can share some ballparks here. So Airbnb, when I was there as a head of product in GM, we went from a home sharing company where you can only book homes to also launching experiences, right? Where you can actually book local experiences while we're doing that. And it was a similar journey where we were like, okay, you're booking a home anyhow in New York City or in Paris. What are you going to do over there? Well, you might want to go entertain yourself. So here are a bunch of experiences. that you can do that. And I think there was always this question of what is the attach rate, or that's an internal technical term, but the idea is like, if a user if you had 100 products, how many of the products the user will use? And roughly, I think it's kind of interesting to note that you will not expect a vast majority of your customers to use in the beginning for sure. So for example, for us, it was like, like less than 10% would book an experience in the beginning days, and our goal was to continue to increase that. But the way to do that was not force feeding just through notifications, but to rather realizing, okay, what are the barriers to adopting this new experience, and what other kinds of things we can latch on to that will appeal to the next cohort of users from the initial 10% as well. I've heard anecdotally, at Amazon and other places, if you get an attach rate of 5 or 6, meaning if you use 5 or 6 other products, and Amazon has a lot, that's a pretty good success. But that's an anecdotal thing, and I can't vouch for it, but that's what I've heard anecdotally.
Loren said.
Yeah, I'd say we're in the same way. Like each product differs. I think even if we look at like our mobility and delivery product, fundamentally we want everyone to be 100%. We're not there. We have things like Uber One to help accelerate that and think about like the cross-platform benefits. But with like the things we're doing in travel, like if you're buying a flight on Uber, I for sure 100% want you to try and book a ride to or from. Or once you're on the way to the airport, also utilize Uber Eats post security to skip the line. But realistically, it's not going to meet everyone's. That's going to meet what everyone needs. So with flights, you can book direct. You can go to other OTAs if you want. So it's thinking about like, how do we still bring value to the platform with these other services, regardless of where you book, but realistically we aim for 100, but it changes for each use case. And we always focus on first, who are the people using Uber Eats and Uber first. Let's start there as our cohort and then work towards the latter tail in terms of like prioritization.
Makes sense. Sid, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I'd say that, I don't have like hard numbers to share, but I think just maybe in terms of like informal heuristics, right? Like if I have a certain offering inside the app, if after a certain period of time, we haven't hit like a 10% activation rate where say 10% of our customers are using it at least, that to me is like, okay, we need to start having a conversation now about unshipping it and killing it, right? If it's hitting something like a 30 to 40%, I think that's healthy. Not everything you offer, not every individual app you offer inside a super app is going to have like 100% adoption, right? If it is really like, it probably needs to be its own app altogether. But right, apart from the core offering of like storing, in our case, like storing crypto, for example, every user should do that. But then beyond that, for certain use case, if like 30 to 40% of users are getting value out of it, and then you can say that for every different app, I think that's like pretty healthy. That's a good place to aim for.
Yeah, thank you. So it sounds like we're centering around that like a 10% number-ish is like somewhere you want to get to. If you get to 7, 8, that's pretty good. 10's okay, but like ideally you want to get that much higher, right? So you want to get into like 20 or 30, but I don't think anyone can hope to get to 100. So that's it. And obviously it depends so much depending on the service you're offering, depending on the customer, depending on the bridge, depending on a whole bunch of different things, right? So even when we think about it, there's certain products like a cash card or gas that people are more likely to cross-sell to, but something like insurance is much harder because that's a much more considered purchase, takes a lot more time, and there's a lot of complicated offerings before you can make a decision like that. Okay. We have about 15 minutes left. I want to talk about something very important, which is AI. So, we've seen obviously the big impact it's made in a very short amount of time. Some companies are already using AI aggressively. Some companies have it in progress. Some plan to use it. So we'd like to talk about AI it can be around the super app and how you're using it to customize the experience and decide what offers to show the customer, or it can just be your usage of AI in general. So I'd like to open that up.
I think maybe we can break down the wide spectrum of AI, the word AI, into smaller chunks as well, because personalization has been there, like machine learning based personalization has been there for 15 plus years. Facebook was the first one to do that. And I think so at one layer, I think everybody needs to personalize the super app experience. That's one, like the basic layer. You can't just throw 100 things at me and expect me to learn every 100 thing. You got to tell me how is that relevant to me? You should be able to understand who I am, and in context, offer that service. And the in context piece is really important. The example, Sen, you were talking about for Uber, you're ordering food and it prompts you to say, you should also get something delivered from the store. Like that in-context personalization, awareness of the user's activity, et cetera, is like the basic thing we all need to do. But then you take it up even further. I think that the other thing that I'm very excited about is how can you then take this to the next level where the user actually has all these experiences pretty much serendipitously. What do I mean by that? Let's take Airbnb as an example, and again, I'm going to cook up new services that don't exist. Just to make my point easier to understand, you are in the home, Airbnb home, you are sitting over there watching Netflix, and how many of us hate signing up on a smart TV with our own Netflix credentials, right? I mean, I should just go over there and I should be able to Airstream everything from my app on that thing. And now I'm actually able to buy movies and watch those things. Now, that is an example of personalization over time that is using anonymous data, but at the same time, is giving you a seamless experience using personalization to a next level. So I think that's the spectrum which we're going to play through. And I'm very excited to see where the next level comes in, but also recognizing that personalization and offering in context experience has always been the case in many of these so-called super apps for many, many years.
Yeah, I like fully agree with what you just said. Personally, I think like generative AI it's like super interesting, but it's a bit overhyped at present. Like it's something we're always constantly evaluating. And to be honest, we're playing around with it quite a bit with like hackathons and things like that. But ultimately, like the core question for us at Uber is like, how does this provide value to the end user? What pain point are we solving? Specifically, when we think about like travel and just like general use. So I think that's what we're still trying to like see how it plays out. I think we can make a lot of those steps of what you're seeing with other sites through just personalization efforts. So if I had to invest $1 in one place or another, right now I'm skewing personalization because we can see that a little bit more versus connecting and paying for tokens and having to then solidify that. And at the end of the day, it's just giving you a bunch of text to play around with. So I think there's still a lot more to come to think about it. But when we bring it to the Uber app, and if we bring it to the Uber app, it's going to be focused on like what pain points are we solving for the consumer. That will be what ultimately defines where and how we use it.
That makes sense. Sid, you have something to add there?
Not really. I think, in terms of AI, we haven't really been like doing a ton of stuff there, but it's always something we think about as product managers generally, right? And like builders. And I think the areas that seem interesting are how can you provide a more human and personal experience when it comes to things like problem solving, right? Like things like customer support. I think many initial attempts at things like chatbots across the entire like customer service industry have not been as good as they could be when you see a ChatGPT type bot. I think that's a good way to think like, could you provide like some kind of concierge assistant service inside your super app that is really powered by AI and this conversational technology that's like kind of like pretty groundbreaking 10x versus where it used to be. I think that's a great thing. In the crypto space specifically, we've been thinking like as AI grows, it becomes so easy to do, and it's not related necessarily to like an individual app that we're building, but the fact that AI lets people create deepfakes and create so much like content that you don't know the actual origin and source of it. And we think that crypto technology could be very helpful in providing provable, verified creators, like who actually made this, who actually said this, was this this interview produced on a verified device that you can sign off on cryptographically. And that's a kind of like, it will help with things like disinformation and FUD and things like that. So that's almost like aside from like anything you build into super app, but I think greater impact on society.
Yeah, no, and that's great. And that's definitely worthwhile mentioning. My initial thought process on using AI and super apps is just to improve personalization. Like personalization has obviously always been there, right? So we always want to be as personal as possible. We want to try and get the right service to the right customer at the right time. But even internally, as we're building, there's a bit of hey, should we offer the customer this? Should we offer them a deal on gas? Should we present them a notification for the next greatest hotel deal because they ran a search recently? So there's like all these inputs. And like as product managers, we're trying to like do things to try and say, hey, we should put this here, or we should like have this much of the home screen for this or for that, and this many notifications per day. But I imagine there's going to be a point where AI will be able to make better decisions, where we can tell the AI and say, hey, here's like the ultimate goal. We want to hey, this amount of retention or this amount of revenue or this amount of usage, and let the AI decide what notifications to send, how to customize the home screen so it doesn't feel like, whoa, there's too many things going on here. It's like just the right amount to sort of maximize conversion and minimize people who are getting annoyed and blocking emails, blocking notifications.
When you think about like setting up an ML model for a given problem, it requires a lot of grooming up front, a lot of like constraints and parameter setting. Like you know, it's not something you can just like say, hey, I want to do this. You got to work with the team to get it set up over the course of a few weeks at least. And I think you're right in that. I think hopefully the AI can be more autonomous in figuring out what problems to solve and solving them. And maybe that's the next level. And also helping like business builders do things directly instead of having to work with, say, a whole ML team that needs to set this up. It's a little bit more of an interface where it democratizes the ability to set up personalized experiences inside apps by letting you do it more easily. Like the AI is able to like take instructions in human-friendly language and do things for you.
And that would be amazing. It's always the dream to be able to get more of these experiments live without requiring engineers. So that would be fantastic. I want to actually switch it over to a couple of questions which came into the Q&A. So the first is just more of a statement. We have Fahad who mentioned that we at Zillow actually talk about super app. So they call it that, and they want it to be accessible publicly. So just wanted to throw that out there, and Fahad, maybe we should connect after this panel. But that's interesting. I never thought of Zillow in that way. And now we have a question from Quarantine that says all the super apps in the West are centered around one topic: Coinbase, crypto, Uber mobility, PayPal, finances, versus the OG super apps like WeChat and Grab that touch dozens of verticals at once. Why do you think that is? Could it be responding to demand in the West rather than creating demand in the East? I can sort of take a first shot at that and mention at the start of this webinar, WeChat was just made at a different time. There were a whole bunch of things that had to exist in order for WeChat to be able to grow in terms of the powerfulness of the smartphones, the government regulations, the sort of infrastructure over there allowed for that to be what it is. And now it's become so central and core to what everybody does. There's no real replicating that. Grab is also an interesting use case, not as extreme as WeChat, but they've had sort of again, an interesting set of conditions that allow them to do that. I think in North America, what you see is that it's actually not so difficult to switch apps. Everyone has powerful phones. Everyone's been sort of accustomed to be like, hey, an iPhone, one phone, and it's like all the apps you want, and you can kind of quickly switch between apps. And then you'll see companies who say, okay, I'm going to focus on a particular use case, and I'm going to go and try and like expand that and sort of grow from there. Whereas in the East, they do a bit more of, let me focus on the customer. So I have a bunch of customers, let me understand who they are, and let me see what else I can do to help them. So it's a bit of a philosophical thing and a bit of sort of an infrastructure piece. But I'd love to pass it to Loren, Sid, or Sanchin if you have any thoughts on that.
I agree with everything you just said there. I think like the regulatory piece is definitely like a big one as well. I think what's also different though is if you look at the super apps that we're talking about today versus those that are more so in the East, like they're getting much more complex here. I think when we think about it with like bridges, AI, and how we're like trying to weave it together, it's very focused on the user experience. I feel like more so in the West than it is in the East. So I think like, yes, they may have gotten bigger, but I think we're really starting to think about it differently and have like higher barriers of entry to thinking about making sure that like we're winning the consumer and have the right to play than you do in other parts of the world.
Yeah, I think plus one to everything. I think when we did a lot of user research back in the day, what we understood was that the customer behavior and mindset is also very different between the two markets. So I think I always still remind people is just because you build a successful product in America doesn't mean it'll work in India. You build it in India doesn't mean it'll work in China, right? You have to recognize we no longer have one uniform customer around the world. They all have different needs and they all have different circumstances. And I think we talked earlier about the circumstances of India and China where the mobile phones were not as powerful and there was a necessity, so to say, all innovation happens because of a necessity. And the necessity over there was, man, I can't download 100 apps. I just cannot. I don't have enough space on my phone. And the necessity in America wasn't that way. We had the iPhone and other phones that allowed us to download many, many apps. Two, I think culturally, we've also noticed that just the customers are just more comfortable with a barrage of information in India and China and other places, versus in America. Like if you ever walk around their version of New York Times Square, there's only one in America. Every city is like that in those countries, right? So the customer expectation and the comfort level they have with a barrage of information, how they manage that is also very different, and the annoyances that come in America are also different. And last but not the least, I think we touched upon regulatory. I think another way to frame that would be just like there's only so much a Facebook or a Google can do to become a super app before a lot of other things start to happen in countries in which they operate versus not. So I think keeping all of those things in mind, I think there's no right or wrong answer. The answer is what is contextual to the geography and the customer base you're serving. So I don't imagine another WeChat coming out of the West. Something new will come up that neither is WeChat nor is a singular use case app. We just don't know it yet.
We have a question from the audience. Okay. From Cody, what's your experience in setting up teams to build the super app? Do you have separate teams for each individual vertical you launch? Could you get away with one team working on your core product and one team building and testing multiple verticals?
So for what we're doing in like Uber travel, for example, we have a team for train, a team for train and coach, a team for flights, a team for like our bridge smart itinerary. So we keep them separate in terms of like separate product managers, separate engineering squads, but overarching vision is tied to all three. So when we go through our planning cycles and our sprints, we're making sure that they're talking and like everyone's building in the same direction. But in terms of staying focused and providing a best-in-class capability, not only on that per product level, we've just found that a little bit of separation is good.
Yeah, I'll plus one that. And I think one thing to remember is super app is an outcome of building amazing individual products. What I mean by that is if you're building Uber Eats, you want that thing to be kick-ass, the best eating product out there, right? If you're building, I don't know, gas, or maybe Hussein, in your case, helping people save on gas, you want it to be the best in class on its own. And guess what? We have amazing distribution because of travel or whatever the other thing is. And we can plug this amazing new idea into that distribution, right? So I think it's important to have single-threaded owners, as we call it at Coinbase, Amazon, other places, who wake up every morning and want to become the best eat ordering food app, right? Best decentralized exchange, best gas saving app, and then leverage the distribution you have with the overall app and plug that into that.
No, I would just echo exactly what they said. The way we do it on our team is all the individual verticals have like a team that's like really dedicated to making, whether it's like NFTs or DeFi, making it great, right? They make it the best possible experience. Also having the technical competence to like really know the market, the technology, all of that. And then we have other smaller pods that are like horizontal, and they are responsible for things like the app architecture, engagement, gamification, discovery, all of that. And their responsibility is to pull all of these products into a really cohesive experience, to get the right bridges built, like you've said before, get the right introductions at the right time, the right notifications, to support all of these products to make them all successful. And so I think setting up that matrix and the incentives for each team, that's really important. And but that's like the general structure that I think works pretty well.
Yep. And again, we'll agree with all three of you. We do the same thing. So we have dedicated travel people. We have dedicated people working on the super pay card, because that's a whole thing on its own. And then we do have a team that's doing the horizontal stuff, but also experimenting and running smoke tests and trying to say, what could be coming next? What else do our customers want to save on? That's, combined with like customer research and doing all these things to try and be like, what else comes next? If you start to see something really take off, you start to see things really do well, you can see us then splitting that off into a separate vertical. So you have a separate team working on that. Okay, we are pretty much out of time. Wanted to really thank all three of you. Really appreciate it. Like I said, we are seeing super apps in North America. They're just very different. So having a theme-based super app is what we're seeing, and we're going to see it continue to grow. Thank you, Loren. Thank you, Sid. Thank you, Sanjay. Really appreciate your time, and hopefully this was helpful for everyone watching.